Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today's HR chat session is Why Hire a Coach for New Leaders? Today, I'm pleased to welcome Cheryl Chester, KardasLarson's practice leader for organizational effectiveness. Hello, Cheryl.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. I'm delighted to have with us today Nancy Rousseau, who is an executive coach and has her own consulting business. And we are pleased to say she's doing some collaboration with KardasLarson. She has over 25 years of experience in senior leadership positions. Her focus is in human resources, especially the leadership development and organizational effectiveness phase. And she's currently working with leaders throughout organizations, especially in the area of communication. She has a real passion for communication and its impact on leadership skills. Oh, Nancy, thank you for being with.
Cheryl, I'm very happy
Let's
to
get
be here.
started.
Very happy to be here, Cheryl. And hello, Michael.
Great, thank you. So, leadership is used in a variety of contexts today. And we know that if you are a person who has management responsibility, you may be called a team leader, a project leader, or a potential leader, an emerging leader. Regardless of those specific titles, we often find that a common theme is that leaders who move into those positions are very good at their subject matter expertise, but in most cases really have never had an opportunity skills. Without these skills, their success may quickly derail. So I'd like to ask Nancy, from your perspective in coaching leaders, what are the skills and qualities on the side that they are in most need of?
Well, Cheryl, I think you're absolutely right. There are many types of leaders, right? And we all love to lead people and work with people, and we kind of strive for that. But oftentimes, like you said, people are very good in their content areas, but when they are put in positions of leadership and they're managing people, they don't always have the skills to do that. And the intensity of trying to do a good job and trying to lead people and trying to develop others, oftentimes they don't get that training that they need or experience that they need, especially in just management training classes.
Sure, great. So catching that skill set as early as possible, I would think, is critical. In order to continually motivate these new leaders to develop their leadership skills, Nancy, let's talk for a minute about what you see as their key needs in transitioning.
Well, I've always thought of leadership as a journey, right? And I think that there's no one right way for one person to say, I'm going to take this track in this training. Everybody has different skills, different abilities. And so I think that leadership is a journey, and people have to be taken where they're at. So, I could be somebody who has great listening skills, but I, don't know how to communicate well my message. And so my message often gets, interrupted. So that's why coaching is so beneficial, because it's very individualized and it really takes a person where they're at and
Great,
helps them on this leadership journey.
great. One of the things we're looking at are some of the areas in which development is critical for these leaders. So, targeted opportunities, challenges, stretches, we know about that. I'd like to, Nancy, dive more deeply now into the mentor or coaching piece.
Yeah, I haven't experienced a whole lot of organizations that do this well.
Mm,
Because oftentimes we're so busy in the fast-paced environment that we're in, regardless of what it is, healthcare, finance, whatever it is, that we say, okay, we promoted this person to this leadership position, but then now what? Maybe we'll send them to a management class. Very rarely do we hire a coach because we often think of coaching for somebody who is having problems rather than hire a coach to develop that person. And one of the key things in really helping a leader grow is really finding a mentor that that person can go to and talk to and kind of problem solve with. And the other thing is really to identify some projects and opportunities that they can jump into and learn. So many of us are hands-on learners, right? We like to touch it, feel it, try it out, and see how it goes before we really you really comprehend that. Oftentimes we forget to one, identify a mentor within the organization, and two, really identify some really key projects for people to work on so that they do learn. It goes all the way up the chain, right? So you have managers, you have directors, you have vice presidents, and everybody plays a role in developing leaders in the organization. And I believe that leaders are even frontline people too. People have influence on other people, our leaders, right? So
Right.
that's why I think an executive, a coach, not a coach like myself or others who are in this business, can come in and kind of help reset kind of the path that leaders take and to really help organizations see that maybe we need to give this person an opportunity here and kind of really identify some goals so that they continually grow. Because as I said earlier, leadership is a journey. It's not, something you can pick up in a course. I'm not sure how much is received if you just go attend a management training program. It really is hands-on kind of experience.
Great. Let me ask you, because we've during our conversations the term mentor a couple times. We're talking about why you would need a coach. Nancy, can you help us understand the difference?
Oh yeah, I think a mentor is somebody who is there to help provide experiences, be there if there's a problem that arises, help introduce the leader to other people so that they get some networking opportunities. But a coach is a very disciplined process. A professional coach is a very disciplined process. And really, starts with a whole process of identify what needs to be done. So really kind of the concept of taking people where they're at. So if they need work on communication, if they need work on how they present themselves, whatever the issue is, that gets established up front in the coaching process. And then really coaching is really about creating a behavioral shift, which, is identified by the person who's being coached. So if I'm somebody who really good at my content area, but my people are very unhappy with me and they're disengaged, I need to really focus on how I'm communicating and how I look at engagement. So a coach could really work with that individual based on the need to really kind of start to shift a behavior or first identify what the issue is, if it's communication or listening or whatever, and then help that person really kind of shift the behavior so that they accomplish what they were set out to do. Coaching is really individualized. It's not directive. The coach doesn't come in and direct the person as to what they should do. The coach shouldn't be advising the person what to do. Um, the coach provides a very safe space. Coaches are, bound to a code of conduct and confidentiality, and they provide a safe space so that it can be used as sounding boards to really kind of process what needs to be done. And we believe, that the person is whole and competent and can make their own decisions. So we just give them a process to do that. And I think sometimes when you have an internal coach, there are a lot of internal coaches, and I think they serve the organization well, but they may have some conflicts of interest. And sometimes internal coaches are connected to HR, so the perception sometimes for people who are using them, are automatic, even though it doesn't happen. Hopefully, the coach is still abides by code of confidence and confidentiality, but it's just perception. hear from HR, so you're going to tell somebody what this is about. So that's where the internal coaches sometimes have struggles in really being effective, because people's perception that they're not going to be, um, on their side, or they're not going to be real true coaches. So
Yeah,
that's well,
good. I love the term a behavioral shift. I think that's a really important term that you used. Whereas, a direct manager or an internal coach or an HR person might be able to, or often will help an employee, a leader, with very specific information and resources available. But it's really that longer term external coach who's working with the leader on altering their behaviors to be more effective.
that's right, Cheryl. And the external coach doesn't have a connection to, the organization, or a bias of any sort. They come in to do the job that they've been hired to do, and the results always are positive, and we always accomplish what we intended to do. The internal structure, it's hard because you also have conflicting priorities. It's
Mm,
hard for internal coaches to really get the time to do this unless an organization has specifically hired just internal coaches. But I think an external coach has its place uh, in an organization, and I would love to see organizations use them more for growing people rather than bringing them in when there's a person who has some difficulties. So it's a problem kind of a situation.
that's an important distinction too, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not really meant, it's certainly not meant to be a punitive resource.
Wow. It's a
Yeah,
gift.
yeah,
It's a gift. I often, when I was in the world of work and organizations, I would say you're going to have a gift. This an external coach is a present to you.
yeah,
It's an
yeah.
opportunity to grow, and be a better leader.
So, Nancy, we know that external coaches are not free, and we know the emphasis on expenses in today's environment. So, from your perspective, you know, how can you help organizations understand why they would invest in an external coach?
Yeah, I think the ROI on especially for maybe a small business, we need to look at two things. One is, what's the cost of turnover in your organization? Because that could be anywhere up to 50 to 60% of a person's salary. So if somebody's making $100,000, if they leave your organization, you're going to be paying another 50, $60,000 to find somebody else, train that
Mm,
person, get them up to snuff. So right there, turnover is a cost. The other big cost is disengagement. If employees don't feel engaged, and trust me, there are a lot of disengaged employees out there, and you know what that means. That means low productivity. And some of the stats around that could be, companies are losing 34% of that person's salary and time, and lack of engagement. And the interesting thing is that you know this as well as I do, and people all around that are listening to this know this too. The employees lead managers, not companies. So if we don't really invest in our leaders, whoever they are, and help them to grow, learn how to communicate better, learn how to listen better, learn how to engage, learn how to communicate targets and important priorities. We're going to have people who aren't right with you, disengaged. Their productivity is not going to be there. We're going to have people who will leave the company, um, and we'll be paying money anyway, and all of those things that you don't necessarily see. It is very clear to me that when you hire an external coach and you help that individual, change does happen, and you could almost put a dollar figure on that. And it's not hiring an external coach forever. There's a time period. There is an action plan that's identified. so that there are accomplishments and targets that are met. It's not just I'm providing somebody just to talk to.
Right.
It's a very disciplined process.
Great. So if you're working with an organization, and they're questioning, that, gee, I don't know if I really want to bring an external coach in. I know there's some benefits for doing so, um, but I don't really know how to even determine what is a good external coach. What are their credentials? What are their backgrounds? Can you help us understand what a company should be looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was working in the healthcare industry, I did a lot of coaching in the job that I had and thought that I was a pretty good coach. But as I decided to open up my own consulting business and work with others in this field, I went and got the certification, the International Coaching Federation, the ICF certification and training. And what I realized is that there is a difference between coaching, mentoring, directing. But I don't think I realized that till I actually, went through the training and became very disciplined in the process. So
Mhm.
I believe that if you are going to spend the money and hire an external coach, you really should be hiring somebody who has this training and certification, because the ICF is very strict on their process, their code of conduct, their ethics, and when they certify somebody, they've certified somebody who's gone through a very rigorous, by the way, training. I've gone through my doctoral work and have a lot of training, but this one, there's a practicum, there's mentorships, there's all kinds of things that you have to do in order to get your certification. So that's number one. I think being certified, if you're going to spend the money on an external coach, it should be somebody who knows that discipline in that process. And I do believe your professional experience makes a difference. Somebody who has been in the shoes of those who you're coaching, who understands the crazy priorities that happen within an organization, and the amount of stress that goes on, and how organizations work, I think is really important too, because the structure of an organization, how it works, how it functions, the culture, all of that makes a difference. And to have experienced that, hopefully in different industries, across industries, and having been a leader in those businesses is really helpful too. And then I think the person has to just be really comfortable with dealing with all levels of individuals, including senior leaders, because you have to really identify the ROI for senior leaders. You have to make the case that this is a good investment, and
Mm,
you have to have the confidence to do that. So I think that's all those things. Um, and
great.
a lot of coaches out there, but not all of them have all of those pieces together.
Right. What about the important components in getting started in coaching a leader?
Yeah. So like I
Because I
said,
think that's a critical piece.
yeah, I totally agree with you, Cheryl. And you know as well as I do that in order for something to work, you need to establish, individual goals first. And how that's done with an external coach would be to work with the client. It's not working with the manager to establish the goals for the client. And that's the other kind of, I think, misconception that people have. This is about the client deciding their path. So, I might be somebody who wants to work with a coach because I need better presentation skills. I need better confidence in dealing with, my superiors, whatever the goal is. So the coach works with the individual first to establish what those goals are. Then then they sit down with the manager and say, these are the goals that we would like to work on. Do you support this? This is kind of like what you see too. And then the manager has the input. What I fear sometimes is managers hiring coaches to spy on others, or to find
Mm,
out information about others, and that's not what the coaching is all about. It's really designed to be a growth process. So the manager has input for sure. So if they feel like there's another goal to be set, we talk about it in those meetings. So there's mutual agreement amongst the parties once that's established, there could be assessments done. So we routinely do 360 feedback or written assessments. The 360 assessment is, getting your peers, your colleagues, your direct reports all on the same page with feedback about your leadership. That could be one thing. Another thing could be, a Hogan, or a Myers-Briggs, or some of these. There's many, many assessments that really looks at different things, style, your interests, whatever. Again, depends on what has been decided as the individual goal will be determined what assessments are done. And sometimes there aren't any assessments. It depends what it
Okay.
is. It's always nice to have some data to provide as a baseline for the behavior you're trying to set. And then an action plan is established with timelines and targets. And then between there are all the regular meetings with the coach and the individual.
Right. So I would think a whole series of milestones would be
Yes.
important. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And then there's a wrap up and review of accomplishments. And what I love about that is that the client is the one that presents the accomplishments, not the coach. The coach could be there, but it's a process driven by the client, and the coach is there to support.
Mm-hmm. So I've always been intrigued by because it seems like a bit of a delicate balance for the external coach to be working with a leader focused on that leader's development, and also keeping their direct manager in the loop without spilling over into the confidential piece. So how do you kind of avoid all of it blending where the direct manager maybe knows too much or is involved in too much of the coaching process?
Yeah, that's a really it's a touchy thing, and that's why you need a trained person to do this, because I think everyone's good-hearted in nature. That the manager has maybe seen something about their leader that they want to correct, and so they're talking to you to see how you can help, but they want information about that person. So the way I deal with it is, up front, I explain the process and share with the manager that I hear what they have to say, but then I'm really clear about if I'm going to engage with this person. Part of the benefit of doing that is that I provide that safe space and that confidentiality, and I'm obligated to do that. So I think communicating that up front, and at the same time recognizing that the direct manager has their own issues too, and trying to listen to that and seeing how I can incorporate their concerns within the goals that are being set for the individual. Because in the end, the direct manager is the one that's going to supervise that person and do their performance.
Right.
So we have to have that balance. That's what I'm saying about when you asked earlier about experience. It's a fine line and a very skillful conversation that you need to have as a coach to be sure that you're honoring that direct manager and not turning them off, at the same time honoring the client. And I've made it work, and I think that when people understand and when you communicate it up front, they understand. I also think having a process really is key, and the parties that are all involved to understand, what the process is, so they can participate in it. And there is a very important element to the process, and that's really the debrief meeting that really is led by the client. And I see that so beneficial because the client takes ownership of the accomplishments, and there's a confidence there. And hopefully that the direct manager will be very supportive of that and be, kind of the cheerleader of that person. That's what that leader should be doing too. Sometimes you're coaching the direct manager as well.
Sure. But at some point when you're handing off and the the coaching assignment is at its end point based on what you've established, the manager has to know uh, where the leader is, what are some of their key goals developmentally moving forward, because otherwise the manager can't really be a partner in keeping this alive, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because, we're never perfect, right? We never end our process. And like I said in the beginning, we're on this journey. And with every leadership role, we gain new um, uh, not barriers, but, the need to learn new things.
Right.
And, we need to, we humans are complicated people that, the managing of individuals is difficult because you're dealing with people, you know,
Yes.
you know,
Yep.
the, if it wasn't for the people say, then we
Yes.
probably
Yeah.
have no problem at all. So it's a
Yeah.
constant journey that we're on to do that. So absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, getting back to the cost effectiveness and why should I spend money on having this other person here when I have internal people, or why should I, do this when I could just talk to the person? It's really about a very structured way to change a behavior that will impact your dollar figure with people, with your profit and your productivity. And, those are the three areas that we kind of look at. And in the end, kind of try to put a dollar figure on, if we can, with those different areas. And I said it earlier, people would be the turnover rate or the engagement rate. Profitability would be, you know, oftentimes companies have a hard time with their managers talking to people about what the goals are and keeping them all, focused on that. And that's part of the coaching piece too. How do we do that? How does a leader do that in a meaningful way when he's got, he or she has, tens, 20 people that he's trying to direct, maybe even more sometimes.
Right.
I've been in organizations where, especially clinical organizations, where nurse managers have, 100 people, that 24/7 operation. How do you do that? How do you communicate with that many people, about the goals? And all that leads to bottom line profits, and productivity. So um, it's complicated. It's not easy. It's not just about sitting around talking and sharing problems. It's really kind of, how do we focus and how do we do that in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
While respecting people.
Yes. It's interesting, Nancy, you in your comments talked about, the fact that employees leave managers and leaders, they don't leave companies. And, certainly all the research talks about that. And it's basically because the leaders are doing very little to challenge their employees and provide feedback, recognition, and development. So, the more we can get leaders to understand and develop the skills and tools to do that, I think it's a great opportunity for organizations. Um, I want to thank you for your insight, Nancy. This has been very helpful. And I want to encourage those of you who have not begun to develop your leaders in a very targeted way to think about doing so by contracting with an external coach. Because not only will it help you prepare for future management and leadership openings in some form of succession planning, but it will also, as Nancy said, help engage your people and retain your key talent, which is such a challenge today. So, thank you for listening to this KardasLarson HR chat. We encourage you to follow KardasLarson to receive information on future webinars and compliance updates, as well as our speaking engagements.